Hi!
Wow, that was so smooth. You know she was crying like 2 minutes ago?
You had to bring that up. He showed me a really sad video.
It's
really sad.
The ending of the movie Call Me By Your Name.
I blatantly got sabotaged.
With Fine Line by Harry Styles on top of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I ever want to feel something, I just put that video on. So.
Anyway, this is Jack.
Oh yeah, hi. Well, I got too comfortable way too quick. Hello Jack, nice to meet you.
This is Jack. Jack makes book content, I'm sure you know. He has 1 million followers. Everyone say happy 1 million subscribers, Jack.
You know how we celebrated with champagne in a field in Wales?
Yeah, and it was probably Prosecco.
Okay. But we had a nice time.
Such a nice time. Such an incredible time. That's Jack's introduction. You know who I am because you're here.
Welcome.
Today we're going to be giving you 21 recommendations, oddly specific recommendations for book requests. We put out our Instagram stories and you guys delivered concerning amounts. Worried about you all, really worried about you all. But we're going to power through, and in total we have 42 recommendations.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. So
you're being fed.
You're being spoon fed.
This is a 6-course meal.
First up we have a book that makes me question my own existence. Number 1, my concern for you. Number 2, what do you think?
That's how we're gonna start? With that? With a crisis?
Honestly, this is probably like the least deep.
A book that recently made me question my own existence was The Parable of the Sower, which is by Octavia Butler, and it's like a climate conscious dystopia.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was written in the 80s, but it's like really eerie and haunting to read now when we are balls deep in the climate crisis.
Wow.
You know?
That's intense.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it all descends to anarchy, but it's also hopeful and it's interesting. Also religion is like a huge motif and theme.
Next up, I didn't do mine.
Oh, sorry, it's just me?
To contrast your decision greatly, I'm going to go with So Predictable. Who's going to be surprised? I'm saying Camus.
Oh, which one?
The Stranger.
Oh!
Yeah. Okay. Because The Stranger is about a man who has a very much lack thereof of emotions. His mum dies, he doesn't show any emotions or any grief or any remorse. And the entire society deems him as less of a human because of this, because he processes his emotions differently. Mm-hmm. And this made me question my entire existence, because it's like, why is there a set construction of how I'm meant to manifest emotions to be deemed as normal and appropriate in a society when everyone processes things differently? Much to think about. Very short book. Read it. Books that make you feel uncomfortable in a good way, but is also beautifully written.
Ooh, okay, you start.
I've spoken about this quite recently, but I will not stop speaking about it for a hot minute because I'm obsessed. A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing by Emma McBride. It is very uncomfortable and very beautifully written. Very uncomfortable in the topics that it explores, very beautifully written in the way that it is so unconventional. It's written from the perspective of a 5-year-old up to adulthood, and it's in the prose is short, it's broken, it's discombobulated, and it's magic.
Oh, I love that. Mine is kind of uncomfy for different reasons, but I put Norwegian Wood, and the reason that it's uncomfortable is because it deals with mental health, and sometimes the writing is a little bit questionable because we're viewing especially women from like a university student male's perspective, so it's deliberately written in a way that it's like kind of a little bit uncomfortable and on the edge, but also it is so beautiful and tender and raw, and holy moly, I love it so much.
Next up we have a book that feels like very relevantly. Did you guys know we're in Paris? Did I mention, by the way, we're in Paris?
That's where everyone comes when they have a breakdown.
I didn't bring up the breakdown.
Oh, sorry. Oh, we're not bringing up the breakdown?
You just like come on my channel like, she was just crying. Maybe she's here because she had a breakdown.
I literally moved here because I went through a breakup and had a breakdown, so...
Well, double homicide.
You want a book rec?
Yeah.
Or just therapy?
So relevantly, we have a book that feels like a trip to a coffee shop in Paris. What did you have?
Okay, for this, I would say Bluets by Maggie Nelson, because it's these little vignettes all centered around the color blue, but that leads to these philosophical, psychological observations of humanity and the human experience, but all refracted through the color blue. So it's so interesting, and yeah, you can just read it in little snippets, but the overall effect is really powerful, and I just feel like you'd feel like the main character if you're reading that book in a little Parisian coffee shop.
Love that! Well, I went with Nadia by Andre Breton because it's French, and I feel like you need to read French literature to feel like the main character in France. Was yours French?
No, I think she's American, but so no.
So Nadia by Andre Breton is about a manic pixie dream girl, basically, but she was one of the first manic pixie dream girls.
The blueprint.
The OG manic pixie dream girl, but the thing is, she doesn't know she is, so the protagonist mythologizes her to a point where we don't even know who the hell Nadia really was, because he just sees her as this savior, and he's so fascinated by her, and it's such a fever dream of a book, and it's very, very French because it all takes place in Paris, so I recommend that one.
I think that's a better recommendation than mine.
I do too.
Okay, at least we're on the same page.
Something I could quote to impress my English teacher. I'm going first.
Fine.
I've got Hamlet.
Oh.
I've got Hamlet, because if you can whip out lines from Hamlet by will, if you can perform Hamlet's soliloquy by will, can you do it?
No. Can you?
Yeah.
Oh.
Whether it's just no room in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows. Outrageous fortune.
Oh, okay, that was pretty cool. Mine is a little different. I think I would go with Upstream by Mary Oliver, because it's about the craft of writing.
Wow.
And she really talks about like a lot of the literary greats who came before us, especially the people who wrote a lot about nature and how the natural world was our best teacher. And so people like Emerson, and she does this deep dive into lots of different poets, but also speaks about her own writing process. And I felt really inspired to write creatively after reading that. So I think that an English teacher would be like, hey.
I do love
that
words on words. It's my favorite category of words. Writers on writing.
Yes.
I'm gonna make a video about that in the future, just like a bunch of writers on writing. I have so many recs for that one. The next one that we have is good main character that becomes bad as the book goes on. We love a tainted protagonist.
Okay. I recently read Boy Parts.
I've been meaning to read that.
It gives me Dakota Warren energy.
Oh, is that
and when I describe the book, you're not going to take it as a compliment, but it is. So it's about this girl who is super witty and has this really dry sense of humor. She's very direct with how she feels. She articulates everything that every sentiment that she encounters in her brain. But basically she takes kind of erotic pictures of men. So she's like reversing the male gaze, turning it into like the female gaze, taking images inspired by the female gaze, and then it gets real messy, real quick, and you realize she is actually terrifying.
Okay, fascinating. Thank you.
Well, like, you're excited to read it, so
yeah,
that's why I thought you were...
I really am excited to read
that's
it.
That's why it made me
My
think
taste in literature is nothing if not unsettling. I have chosen for this one Bunny by Mona Awad, because this is a fascinating one. Have you read it?
No, but it's on my list.
It's got so many layers to this book. How to even sum? A girl goes to university, gets caught up in a clique of fever dream-esque, academic, but very much, what's even the word, like Mean Girls academic, but like, but like cottagecore type. It's just this whole interesting clique experience, but they all do really horrible things, and it's magic. It's magic realism. The word bunny comes because they turn bunnies into boys just so they can go on dates with them. The protagonist witnesses this from start to finish. Initially she meets these girls like, what the hell's going on? And at the end she's the worst one. I'm
getting like The Secret History meets Mean Girls.
Yeah, exactly. I could not be summed up better.
I can't wait to read it. Before we go any further, a quick word from today's lovely sponsor.
Before we go any further, a quick word from today's lovely sponsor. If you want to Fancy seeing you here. My job today is to gush over today's sponsor, Squarespace. We love Squarespace on this channel. If you don't know yet, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform that makes creating websites and maintaining them easy and fun. It's perfect from everything from online stores to blogs, and I know this because I created my own website with Squarespace and it was a very rewarding experience. I can play with so many aspects like email campaigns if I wanted to, member areas. I can also track my analytics, which is quite important to me because I'm just nosy. In all seriousness, I've loved setting it up and it was so much easier than I expected, and I am quite proud of it actually. So you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your own website, head to squarespace.com/DakotaWarren for 10% off your first purchase of a domain or website today. Thank you, Squarespace, and back to you, Dakota and Jack. I don't know if you guys know this, but Jack loves translated literature.
Yeah, I already do.
And so this is his favourite translated fiction work.
Season of Migration to the North. It's a
wonderful,
wonderful,
you told me about this
book translated from Arabic. And it's basically, if you've read Heart of Darkness, it's basically Heart of Darkness in reverse. There's scenes where people in the UK kind of fetishize and exoticize people from kind of colonized countries. They're like, wow, you're so exciting because of their foreignness, you know? So it sort of unpacks that, and it honestly, it's short, but so impactful, and yeah, I feel like you don't hear that much in the UK, especially about literature translated from Arabic, but it's great. I'm really glad I found it, and I recommend it all the time, yeah.
I'm gonna go with Bestiary by Julio Cortázar. It's a collection of short stories, but it is still fiction. And oh my god, I can't gush about this enough. So I have previously mentioned upwards of 50 times how much I love Latin American lit because it's all just so unhinged. And as we know, I love unsettling, unhinged, disturbing literature, and Latin American literature checks all these boxes. And Bestiary is a collection of short stories about magic, realism, surrealism. It's got basic things like love triangles to things that are very much not basic and disturbing, and I adore it very much.
I'm taking that recommendation.
Next up we have books where the protagonist is so flawed but you can't help but love them.
Oh.
Yeah. I love, this is also one of my favourite genres.
These are just recommendations for you.
Yeah, I know. This is obviously my audience.
I think maybe My Sister the Serial Killer, because it's like messed up. And so basically you follow someone who is always having to clean up her sister's mess because her sister like cannot stop murdering her boyfriend.
Oh wow, this is great!
And like, it's so silly and ridiculous, and it's kind of written in a bit of a satirical way. But I just kind of fell in love with these characters a little bit, and they're making terrible life choices, and I just was really rooting for them to turn it around and to be able to hide the body and stuff.
You can come back from that.
I don't condone being a serial killer, but I don't mind reading a fictional little story about one, you know.
Wow, you just growled. Relevantly from that, moving on, my recommendation is called The New Animal by Ella Baxter.
Nicely done.
Thank you. I've done this before. I read this really recently, so it's still fresh. It's fresh in my brain, but I guess it's been a month. So it's not fresh, it's just an incredible book.
Well, Caleb Azuma Nelson says that you should always think about the books that continue to pull you back.
Yeah, this is pulling me back.
Pulling you back, then it feels fresh, you know, even though it's been a while.
So this book is about our protagonist. Her mum dies very quickly on, her mother dies. Their entire family is in the mortuary industry, so they own a funeral home, so they're not inexperienced with death. They live and breathe death, but her mum dies, and it's a different experience when it's your mum. And so in order to cope with her grief, she goes on an absolute roller coaster journey by exploring BDSM to distract herself.
That isn't where I thought you were going with that.
Yeah, I didn't think, nobody does. Her mum just died, and it's like, you're grieving, let yourself grieve, you need to grieve, but she's just like, no, I'm going to go to a sex club. And it's just an incredible book. It's actually really sad. I sobbed like a little baby at the end of it because the ending is beautiful. Also, Ella Baxter is a Melbourne writer, and it's her first novel, and I must support Melbourne writers, so incredible work. Oh, I love this one. Books to read in the summer whilst in a little dress eating fruit. What would you wear in a little dress eating fruit?
Regularly, I do that, yeah. I've got tons for this one.
Yeah, I bet.
You go first while I think.
The Girls by Emma Klein is a perfect one for this.
Cult vibes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I think of sticky summer in little dresses and just like kind of rancid and feral, I think of The Girls by Emma Klein. It's based on loosely the Charles Manson murders, so fascinating first and foremost. A young girl finds herself involved with the hippie commune groupie type element that Charles Manson spin-off has cultivated. And it is fascinating. They all walk around wearing little dresses and they all eat fruit, but not much of it because they're flat broke. And they're idolizing this absolute sociopath. It's just fascinating. It's such an interesting read. I really recommend it. The prose is stunning.
Okay, mine's on a different note, but mine is Small Pleasures by Claire Chambers, because it's kind of this like quiet, small little book about the little beauties in our lives, like the little things you can appreciate.
I love how for summer read I'm like, yeah, cult, death, and you're like, little beauties of life.
Yeah.
Books that make you feel like you're staring at a Renaissance painting. Oh wait, I have this book on hand. What do you think I'm gonna get them?
Wow, not a prop.
Oh god, it's buried in my suitcase. Okay, should I go first?
Not a single thought has crossed my mind.
I love when I can hold the books. I'm such like a shower. And when I don't have a book, I'm just like...
I love the cover!
Isn't it stunning?
Yes! Keen has conjured a protagonist who purged my mind and filled my heart.
Yeah, so this is a modern day spin-off on A Room of One's Own by Wolf. Do you want me to leave this with you? Do you want to read it?
Yes, please! I'm sorry. Sorry about that, everyone. Sorry, so as you were saying, it's like A Room of One's Own.
Yeah, so it's A Room of One's Own with a few wicked twists. It's very short, it's very fast paced, but it's one of those books where nothing happens. If that makes any sense.
No plot, just vibes.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, but to some it is very pretentious. It's so pretentious. A rich writer is just complaining about life. That's the whole plot, really. That's the whole plot. But so she has a bit of a turnaround. She starts off as a maid in an art gallery and then she marries rich and she ends up as a rich writer, and there's a bit about that trajectory. But it's just so privileged and pretentious. But it's short and it's interesting. So take it with a grain of salt. Okay,
mine is gonna be My Policeman, for the same reason that it also features someone who works in an art gallery.
Did you just copy me inadvertently?
Yes. It's not the best example for this, but it does feature a character who works in an art gallery, and it's also a good summer read because it's set in Brighton, on the beach. They learn to swim. It's like a two-way love affair.
Nice.
And it's wonderful. And the movie is coming out about it very soon, so like an adaptation is coming out soon.
Always have to read the book before the movie.
So if you want to be that person who's like,
be that person.
I actually read the book first.
Yeah, there is no shame in being that person. Books to get into Japanese literature.
Yes, we love Japanese literature.
Yeah, we do. You go first.
And
to quickly make sure that I'm getting the title right.
I'm going to go with Heaven, which is a book about bullying. Ostensibly it's about bullying, and it's about these two kids in the same class who are both individually experiencing bullying. But the book then goes on to speculate and question and analyze why bullying happens, why violence towards people we perceive as weaker happens.
Wow.
And it's so fascinating. It was nominated for the International Booker Prize this year, and it's wonderful. It's a really interesting read. It's not my favourite, but I do think it's a good like entry point to the themes that Japanese literature discusses.
Yes, I love my favourite thing about Japanese literature is how deeply philosophical, but on surface level it's not.
I like that it really often focuses on one person's mundane, ordinary life, and it picks out really universal and ubiquitous experiences and then expands from there. And so on the surface it seems small, but the philosophy is huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My first Japanese literature book, I was quite confused because it felt so accessible and I didn't really know what was happening on beyond like the surface level story. And then after finishing, I was like, whoa, my mind was blown.
They're the kind of books that stay with you.
Yeah, I had to think about it for so long and it was incredible. My one that I've chosen for this is If Cats Disappeared from the World, and I read this like 2 days ago. And I'm so excited. It's fresh in my brain because I read it 2 days ago, but I think I'm going to be thinking about it for a while. Because this book messed me up. It made me think about the fundamental human condition in ways that I never have.
That's what you want!
Yeah,
that is what we're asking for.
Basically, to sum the plot, a man is dying. A man is dying, he gets diagnosed with like final stage cancer, and the devil appears and says, okay, sacrifice something for an extra day of your life. And so basically this man had to weigh up his life, a day of his life, and his morality versus the entire world. And the devil wasn't asking to get rid of things like the dust on the top of the counter. He was asking to get rid of things like clocks, time, cats. Oh. This all had ricocheting effects on the entire world. And this man was like, but I get a day of my life. I'm not finished living. And it's really interesting to see how it pans out.
You know, there's another Japanese book called The Memory Police.
Are you?
I'm feeling generous. There's a book called The Memory Police, which is all about where it's a dystopia where they slowly remove things from people's memory, and from society they remove like birds, ribbons, things like that.
That's very similar.
So similar vibes.
Very similar vibes. Fast-paced books because I get bored easily. Me too.
Oh.
Fast-paced books. Okay, I'm gonna start.
We love a fast-paced book, don't we?
Yeah, I love a fast-paced book, but more importantly, when I get bored easily and I'm in a bit of a slump, short story collections do it for me.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna go for this. I'm gonna give you a short story collection. One that I've read quite recently that's still in my head is Send Nudes by Sower Sams. It is a collection of short stories and it's all quite accessible and quite realistic, but also not. It's realism, but it's unhinged realism. Are you gonna copy me again?
No. I'm gonna go with Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, which is all about one man's kind of quest for self-discovery, I suppose, and he's thinking about his faith, which he ultimately finds sort of within himself. And it's short, it's snappy, it's kind of like a journey novella. So you kind of follow him on quite a linear walking journey, but also a mental, spiritual journey too. So it's kind of like a bit of a classic, but also very accessible, easy to sort of understand, but a lot to unpack as well.
Books that feel like walking around a city when it's quiet. The way that I interpret this, I think we're going to have different interpretations. When I think walking around a city when it's quiet, I think of loneliness, inconsolable emptiness inside of you, you know, breaking point. And
yeah, you're right. You doing okay? Everything alright? What's your recommendation then, lonely girl?
I chose Frankenstein. If you thought I was going to get through a whole video without choosing Frankenstein, you're wrong. I chose Frankenstein because when I read Frankenstein, I get really sad and lonely. Because you know what Frankenstein's about. I don't have to sum the plot to you about Frankenstein, but just the scenes where the monster is just strolling, looking for his purpose, trying to find something or someone who understands him. Yeah. What do you choose?
Damn. Yeah, that's a good one. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, because she is, it follows a lady over the course of 24 hours, and she is hosting a party in London, and she's kind of walking around the city, thinking, but also it really deals with the trauma that people experience from the war, and it's a really exquisitely written book, and so much to unpack there.
Incredible. Wolf can do no wrong. We love this because you know that we went to a Lorde concert in Paris?
Tell me you're the main character without telling me you're the main character. We went to see Lorde in Paris.
Yeah, I'm not bragging, I'm just bragging.
And we danced to ribs.
We danced to ribs.
I felt every emotion I've ever felt in my life.
Oh my god, it was a spiritual
3 minutes
experience.
and 20 seconds.
I saw God.
Oh yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyway. Yeah, anyway.
Books that remind you of Liability by Lorde. If you haven't heard Liability, pause. Go to Spotify.
Baby
or
really
maybe
hurt
YouTube or
me
something.
crying in the taxi.
You don't wanna know.
When you hear that line, you know.
Yeah, go listen and then come back. Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
That song twists the knife. Even if you know the song, go and listen to it. And let's all just be sad
emotional damage, that song.
Yeah, big time. I'm going to recommend a very recent read for me, which is Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead. And it's about a woman who had a very near-death experience when she was a tiny baby, but was saved from a shipwreck. And then she moves in with her uncle and she picks up flying. She always wants to be a pilot. You follow her life, which is often filled with loneliness and feeling like she is too abundant and too much for people, and often she pushes people away who, you know, you're like, oh, you could have a really great life with this person. And then we also follow a woman 100 years later who is playing her in a movie, right?
Oh, wow.
And she starts to find similarities in her own life and her own attitudes, but also starts to uncover little bits of the mystery about how this pilot went missing at the end of her life. I have problems with it too, but I enjoyed it overall, and I think it gives me Liability vibes.
That was like a 5 minutes.
Shut up, Jack!
Those of you who watch all my videos are probably so sick of me saying the same
Oh, I'm like, what's coming?
I'm going to die on this hill. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell.
And if you think that she recommends it a lot on YouTube, she also does it in person.
I think, yeah, how many times, regardless of who we're with or what situation we're in, I will find a way to bring this book into it.
And make
everyone read it.
Yeah.
I will put it in everyone's notes app. And I'll be like, message when you're done reading it. How many times have I sung this? This book follows Vanessa Y from two perspectives. So when she's 15 and when she's older, horrible things happen. She gets groomed by her male teacher, so this is a very sensitive topic book, but it's approached so carefully and delicately, but raw and real. And just Vanessa, we have an entire glimpse into her head at both ages when it's happening, and ages as she's an adult coming to terms with the fact that she was a victim and that she is not the problem. We have this realization of her becoming, I suppose, adjusted to the fact that she is actually a victim, and incredible, important, vital read. A book that your teenage self cried over for days.
Perks of Being a Wallflower.
I was gonna put that one.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
I could do something else.
glad I said it first then.
You're gonna tell us what it's about.
No. The Perks of Being a Wallflower.
Just like 1 minute.
It's wonderful.
I'm gonna go with We Were Liars, and this is so controversial in the book community. And so I preached it from the rooftops because I thought that it would be reciprocated with the same love that I felt for it when I was 14 years old. Wasn't. It really wasn't. But I love it. It's incredible. You know, if you've read it, that one scene with the dogs. Full stop. Next question before I cry again. A book with beautiful writing, but you have to reread to understand. I will forever do that while I'm trying to start. The editing's gonna just be like
Yeah, because there'll be no context because you'll edit it out a mistake. So you'll just have me going.
I'm going to go with Nabokov, Pale Fire, because his experimental narrative structure is everything. And his prose, like, we know I could gush about Nabokov's prose forever and always. This is not a new thing, this is a universal thing. Nabokov's prose is god tier, and his narrative style is god tier. Pale Fire is experimental in the way that it is a poem, an epic poem, but the poem isn't the story is in the footnotes that are annotated by the man who wrote the poem's friend, who is insane. And it's written so beautifully and fascinating. Have you read it?
No.
Please.
I want to now.
Yeah. Fascinating, and I had to reread it twice because the first time I didn't know that the footnotes was the story, so I just read the poem and I was like, this makes no sense. Really incredible, amazing. I was gobsmacked. That's yours.
Oh, I forgot I had to think of one. I was just like, yeah, that's a really good recommendation.
Wow, yeah.
What was the question?
Book with beautiful writing, but you have to reread to understand.
Oh, I think Death of a Salesman. I studied it in class actually, and most of us responded in a way where we just blamed the main character for being like a terrible bloke and making bad decisions. But the more you reread it, and I've read it so many times because every time you feel his emotion so much more and you understand why he behaved in the way that he did, and you end up feeling more sympathy for him, or empathy. Yeah, I think you just kind of start to understand how things have led to that point. So
interesting.
yeah. And the writing is stunning as well. It's heartbreaking.
I think, yeah, prose, like beautiful prose is a given for everything we read.
And it's a play, it's a bit different too.
Books that are written through letters, preferably gay. Can I go first?
Yes, please do.
I feel like the person who asked me this might have set me up because it's a perfect answer. Or maybe it's just like an accident. But I'm gonna go with Unearthed Are Bravely Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. It is an incredible book. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. I've read it like 6 times now, and I have sobbed every time. It's a series of letters from a son to a mother who cannot read. So imagine he's just writing to the void and he's pouring his heart and feelings out about his experiences with his family and his life as a Vietnamese immigrant, and his experience being queer, his identity, everything about that. It's such a beautiful, enriching book. But just...
Well, that's the perfect recommendation. Books that...
I'm not sure if there is another recommendation that good.
No, books that are written through letters. Lady Susan, which is like Jane Austen's lost classic that she wrote when she was 17.
I have not even heard of that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah, and
you've read it?
And it's good.
Is it big?
No, it's dinky, and it's written. Do you say that? Dinky. It's very short and concise.
Amazing.
But it's a very memorable like character.
Next we have a book that feels like a fever dream.
Okay, I have the perfect one for this, and it is Earthlings by Sayaka Murata.
I've been meaning to read that.
Holy hell! I don't know what the heck happened when she decided to write that book, but it's outrageous and absurd and insane.
Sounds amazing.
Only read this if you like being shocked and disgusted, because that's how you'll feel. I think if you pick this book up and you don't want to like physically cringe, you'll hate it completely.
I'm so excited to read it now.
But I think when writing gives me such a physical emotion and response, I think that's a real talent.
Evidence of powerful writing is like a physical guttural response.
Yeah, and that's how it feels for sure.
Yeah. I'm going to go with Paradise Rot by Jenny Havalla, bringing back an old favourite here. Paradise Rot is Norwegian literature, and a Norwegian student is an exchange student, and she doesn't get accommodation with the university, so she has to bunk with another girl in a rotting, decaying brewery. It's such a common, accessible plot in the way that it is a university story and like a budding sapphic love story, but you just don't know what happened, because at the end, one of them just evaporates. And everything's just rotting, the walls are rotting, the fruit's rotting, everyone pees everywhere, it's a lot of pee in it. Yeah, it's just a lot happens, but I love it, I really love it. I'm really interested to hear what you'll say for this one. Books where the protagonist reminds you of yourself. Yeah.
I have one. You want to go first?
No, I'd actually like you to.
Okay, but mine is like a book that you didn't like, which is, well, mine is a book that you didn't love.
Oh, you're not saying Connell, are you?
Like,
you are!
Listen, literature student who feels imposter syndrome, studying at university, goes through a breakup because they're traveling abroad. Like, it was literally my life at the time, so I felt it super, yeah, it really hit me.
Get well soon.
Thanks.
I'm gonna go with A Picture of Dorian Gray. I'm not gonna expand on it at all.
Okay, that's where we're leaving that.
Yeah. Best short story.
What we talk about when we talk about love. By Raymond Carver. It's a really great short story collection.
Yeah.
It's bizarre but brilliant, and yeah, I loved it.
Amazing.
What's yours?
I have the dangers of smoking in bed. I will speak
So
about this
good.
until I die. Incredible book. Absolute. Once again, Dakota's recommending unsettling, weird, fever dream,
Gothic
books.
Mm.
I'm so glad you said God at the same time I said piss kink. Because they can't hear me say it.
You said piss kink while I said.
Now we've got books that we'd recommend to each other. This was a big recommendation. I mean, big request.
Mine is 100,000,000% The Promise by Damon Gallagher. It's a fantastic
He
book.
actually hasn't shut up about it.
No. Structured as 4 funerals, 4 sections, 4 funerals, and we follow a white family in South Africa during apartheid, and it's so brilliantly written.
Amazing. Well, he was successful in trying to attempt to get me to read this because I am seeking it out the second I land back in London. Also, I was really lucky that at Hay Festival we got to actually witness the author discuss this book. We both got to see this man talk about this book, and it was incredible.
So stunning.
Yeah, amazing, incredible. If you ever get the opportunity to meet an author or go to a panel where the author discusses their work, drop everything and run to the author, not away from the author.
In the opposite direction.
The books that I recommend to you, this is based on a conversation the other day, Kafka's Diaries.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, Kafka's diaries. So if you've read Kafka's work, it is vastly different to his diaries. We're all familiar with the cockroach. We're all familiar with the trial and whatnot. But Kafka's diaries show this side of him that is just so intimate in the way he discusses love and hopelessness and all of these like fundamental human conditions that are glossed over so commonly is so beautiful and in depth. And if you are looking to get a more intrinsic interpretation of Kafka and how he sees the world, I really recommend it. Kafka's words on words as well, because you're writing a book. Wait, is that public knowledge?
Yeah.
Okay, Jack's writing a book, and so I think words on words is really helpful for writers to read when they're writing as a writer. Writing is utter solitude, the descent into the cold abyss of oneself. And then it's got peaceful moon, I consist only of bones. My condition is not unhappiness, but it is also not happiness, not indifference, not weakness, not fatigue, not another interest. So what is it then? Next question, we can.
How do we move on from that?
Yeah, sorry. Always do that.
A book so dark academia that I want to run away, change my major, and join an elitist university.
Can I do this one?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm gonna say?
The Secret History?
Yeah, I'm gonna say The Secret History.
Damn it! No! Okay, fine. I'm gonna say If We Were Villains, which is like similar vibes, but
I've heard that.
a lot more diverse.
Cool.
Yeah.
And there you have it. 21 times 2, 42 literature recommendations from two sides of the planet.
Two big book nerds.
Yeah, two book losers. I love you, and I'll see you next time, and I will miss you until then.
Yeah, I'm ready. I've been waiting for this moment.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Hi.
Goodbye!